We learn a lot from the we learn a lot from the assassination of Father Kaiser. I will talk about it. I remember during the task force for the TJRC, I wrote a detailed assessment and gave it to the office somewhere around the community high court. They had an office there. 3 years after I had given my assessment, there was a murder inquest. There was a death inquest on Father Kaiser, and their findings agreed a lot with my findings. Kizungu ya siku hizi, someone would say I hacked the inquest before it was started. The question is, if I could come up with such a thing, why didn't I give evidence in the inquest? The reason is simple. I wrote the detailed report to the task force, Professor Makau Mutua's task force on TJRC, from the opinion of an expert person who can say, I think this and this must have happened. So in law, such a person is not allowed to give evidence unless you give an expert opinion. I will come to that because we learn a lot from Father Kaiser's death or assassination. But let us look briefly at his history, because as I've always said, your history, you are known by your history. It's like, although it is not related to this, but it's like when you are found in a place, killed, and alcohol is placed next to your body to give impression that you drink, someone can come and say that since he was born up to now, he has never tasted alcohol. So I'm trying to say that it is good to know somebody's background. He was born on 29th November 1932, somewhere in Minnesota. I think people from Nyamira have a more than casual interest in Minnesota. He went to local schools, and in 1954, when he was 22 years old, he joined the military as a para and rose to the rank of sergeant. Para is one of the elite squads or formations in the military. President Ruto's first ADC is a para officer. That is why you find that when he's wearing working dress uniform, he usually dons a green beret. It is like in the police, the GSU are proud to have a red beret. Now he rose and became a para sergeant. Then in 1960, 6 years after joining the military, he graduated in UK in a Bachelor of Education in English Literature. When he graduated in 1960 in English Literature, he immediately joined Mary Hill, that is still in England, where he studied fatherhood or priesthood for 4 years until 1964, when he became a padre. He was posted to Kenya in 1964 So from 1964 to 1990, to the year that he died, he didn't die in 1990, but to the year that he died, he stayed in Kenya. Stayed in Kenya throughout his life. Of course, occasionally, especially when he's on leave, going to visit his relatives. Now, after all that long stay, he had problems with the government. Why? Because of two reasons. One, he was concerned about intertribal tension. He was a regular visitor of Maela refugee camp. The government was not happy. But the second reason, which is minor, which is useless, but which is the real cause why he was killed, was because he differed with a government minister, and the minister was the Minister of State in the office of the President. What happened is that this minister took a lady, an underage girl, removed her from school, made her pregnant, and that girl, to make it worse, the girl was a cousin to the minister. So as a priest, Father Kaiser said this was immoral. Then you heard me mention the word 1990. 1990, he was denied permit to stay in Kenya, just because he was viewed. Imagine somebody who had stayed in Kenya from 1964 to 1990, you can calculate that. He has now been declared a threat to the state. From that time, a few years later, he was, staying in Kenya for that, staying in any country which is not yours for that period, you feel as if you're part of the country. So there was a pushing and pulling, and in fact, even one time, the then American ambassador to Kenya, somebody Carson, he intervened and had his work permit renewed. So every time there was a renewal, he would have to fight for it. That is his background. I want now to talk about my favorite way of talking. I usually like tracing the last 48 or so hours before he died. Father Kaiser had a gun. The gun was a 303 Mark IV. It is not automatic. Father Kaiser, one of the ways the intelligence used to do, and I think nowadays I'm not there, so I think they still do what to do. They study you, as I said. If you don't drink, they cannot trap you with a drunk problem. So they knew that he was very emotional. They played around with his emotions. That is to prepare a scenario where people would say that he killed himself because of mood swings. Now this is what happened. I have studied and documented things that are gunshot instances, especially within the police services. We have people like the late, my personal friend, Constable Charles Kimani. We have cases of Abaswain, where a police officer accidentally shot at his own cousin. We have a case in Kongelai, next to Kacheliba in West Pokot, where a wreck company officer threw a grenade at some other wreck company officers within the GSU camp, And after realizing that he had immobilized his cousin and namesake, Njeru, they were both called Njeru, he went and shot himself using a GPMG, general purpose machine gun. So I know about suicide by gunshot. Let me tell you one thing. If you want to kill yourself through suicide by gunshot, there are very many things. In fact, it can take 3 of these steps. But the first thing is we study which hand do you use. You use the left. So if you shoot, if you are lefty, the gunshot has to come from left to right. If you are right-handed, right to, and then there is the direction. If you are shot from up here or up here, most likely it is somebody else who shot you. Someone who shoots himself shoots either this way or that way, and in some occasions parallel to the ground this way, depending on the hand that you use. And as far as Father Kaiser, I'll come to his vehicle when he died, but as far as Father Kaiser, how can you take a rifle you have in Lolgorian, that is Transmara, drive all the way to Gong Road, Adams Arcade, spend there 2 days, then after 2 days, you leave that place, drive yourself all the way to Naivasha and shoot yourself? According to my opinion as an expert, when one wants to shoot himself or herself, the moment you have made a decision and you have a gun, a loaded gun, if you make a decision to shoot yourself and you have a loaded gun, 5 minutes, when 5 minutes passes and you have not shot yourself, chances of shooting yourself diminish further and further. You may plan to shoot yourself a week, a month, or anything, but from the time you get the gun, and again when you get the gun, you don't care. You shoot yourself anyway. Now you don't have to shoot yourself so as to implicate the other person or something. You don't care. After all, you're getting out of the world, so whatever happens, you... And again, many cases, you may have talked something or you may have written something to show that you are going to kill yourself. Father Kaiser left, he knew that he was being followed, and in fact he even had talked to some people and said, if you hear that I'm dead, then I've not killed myself. Being a military man like Bishop Muge, he knew what was happening. You know, you can take a village out of the village, but you cannot take, you can take a villager from the village, but you cannot take the village out of the villager. You can take the military out of Father Kaiser and Bishop Muge, but you can't take the knowledge and training. So those who have studied him, even when he was at the guest house at around Adams Arcade or along Gong Road, he was behaving moody. That is what they wanted. So he decided to go away. When he decided to go away, they started using what we call hostile surveillance. Now, if you check my videos, you'll find there is a topic on hostile surveillance. They did hostile surveillance on him, and that is why in Naivasha, when he was trying to run away from them, he had even to hit the fence of a couple and entered the compound violently. These people could not enter the compound, and when the couple had their gate had been smashed, when they came out, they found a Mzungu with a bumper that was somehow broken. You see, we have these, especially a good number of people. If it was an African driver who had done that, this couple would have demanded for the gate to be repaired or something. But when they came and saw Mzungu, I hope you understand there. They asked him if there is anything wrong. He said it's okay. Then he went out with the vehicle, and out there they were still waiting for him. He rushed to a petrol station. When he rushed to a petrol station, they followed him, but when he entered the petrol station, they kept around the area. Petrol attendant saw him parking somewhere, inspecting the bumper that he had crashed into a gate, and he did not seem to be a person who was worried or anything at all. He just removed the bumper, and when he removed the bumper, he drove off. They followed him. He was shot from here. The bullet came from here. If you remember, I said the bullet usually either from here or here, and if it is the other side, it is either from here or here. He was shot from here, and it extracted from here. And then he was placed inside his double cabin vehicle. Now here is where the challenge is. Those with military training or security training will say that the kind of gun used, this one is Mark IV caliber 303, is a gun that is not automatic. It has a strong blowback system. So you have to be very far from. And again, before I continue, during the post-mortem, it was discovered that the gun, you know, when you are shooting yourself or somebody shoots you while resting the firearm on your body, there is usually the fire that is at the muzzle. Now this fire has to burn this area. But when you shoot from somewhere, the fire will be somewhere here, away from your skin, and so you'll not be burned. There will be no fire. So it shows that when he was shot from here, it was from a distance. Now if it is from a distance, and it is a rifle, not a pistol. You know, a pistol maybe you can hold this way, but a rifle. And not just a rifle like what we call SLR, kina AK-47, kina G3. No, this was a completely manual gun that is supposed to be held strongly by somebody from far. But I was back at the double cabin inside the vehicle. Sorry, I get carried at times, although rarely. At the double cabin, you cannot shoot yourself even if you are at the passenger seat, co-driver's place. You know, double cabin, those who are sitting at the back, usually there is a smaller as compared to the co-driver. Even if you are at the co-driver's place. I told you about the wreck company fellow who shot himself at Kongelai. He used an LMG, Heckler and Koch 21 belt-fed unit. He held it with his knees and used his thumb toe. Is it called a thumb toe? I'm an expert in security, but not in language. Thumb toe to press the trigger, then the trigger shot him here. And that is an automatic gun. And I can assure you, if you have a G3 and you're seated at the co-driver's place in a double cabin, you cannot shoot yourself. It is so compact. But you see, Father Kaiser is supposed to have been shot, to have shot himself at the driver's place where there is the pedals, the 3 pedals. Nowadays the vehicles do have 2. The 3 pedals, you have the steering wheel here, and then you have the gun. And you don't just have a G3, you have a Mark IV caliber 303. That is impossible. But then again, to make it even more impossible, you are even supposed to have carried it up here, and you know there is the roof. They killed a man of God. Now, lastly, I have had cases where people say, oh, let us call in the FBI, let us call in the Scotland Yard. FBI came and they knew what happened to Father Kaiser. But you see, they looked at the bigger picture, if you can call it that. The relationship between Kenya government and the US government. Is it more important than a bachelor, just a single person? So they decided to look the other side and decided to release a statement which the Kenya government would have wished to have. So when next time you start pushing for FBI to come, remember Father Kaiser. Let us go to Julie Ward. Julie Ward, the Scotland came. I can only say that the only case that we have had that the foreign investigators did a good job was the Ouko one. But Julie Ward, it was obvious. How can someone get out of a forest, be killed by wild animals, then she takes her own bone, puts it, I don't know, in a mud, then writes SOS on a vehicle. Scotland came and knew exactly what happened to Julie Ward. But as I said, some of these foreign investigators and intelligence organizations, they look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is the picture of good relationship between the host country and that. We have, I can tell you, we have in Kenya very good investigators. We only need to give them the free hand. Let the investigators remember their initial investigation course. During my time, the initial investigation course used to be called Course E. Course E used to say that when you are investigating a case, there are only 3 people whom you should not suspect. Even the DCIO who is sending you. You remember the case of the sergeant who was working at Ruto's office. Kinoti was trying to, there was a recording where Kinoti was telling people, you see, so he's trying to tell the investigators, lead them into a certain thinking. But Course E used to say that you only don't suspect 3 people. The first person you don't suspect is God, the Almighty. I'll not talk about that. The second person you'll not suspect was the president, because he was above the law. And even today, the president cannot be sued for anything while in office. By the time he retires, you can follow him into retirement and sue him. And the third person is you, the investigator, because you know that you didn't do it. Lastly, an investigator should not go there with a predetermined decision. An investigator should just go there with a blank mind, so that anything he sees there, he uses the 5 senses. Whatever he gets at the scene of the crime is what he will determine his opinion as to how a crime was committed. Thank you.